This is a force of water that is truly, it goes beyond the mind's comprehension. It's something that I don't think we could even understand. But if you pan out, people have to understand that this is a couple hundred miles from one side to the other.
Yeah.
And so this would have been a force of floodwater that I think goes beyond anything we could have thought possible. I think this is why scientists have somehow missed it, because I don't know how to say this, but no one else seems to be talking about this.
Now, the structure that you think is Atlantis, how tall are those concentric rings?
So it is the entire structure from one side to the other is nearly 30 miles, but the interior structure of the concentric circles is 16 miles. And this is one argument that's made against it, is that the size dimensions that Plato had gave are significantly smaller. And so, but I would make two arguments on this. One, this is a 12,000-year-old story, and
Go back to that, please.
I would argue that it is impossible for over 12,000 years to carry down precise translations because of
how off is it from the translations?
Oh, significantly. The entire site would be a small circle inside the middle of this circle. But here's the reason why I think those dimensions are wrong, is because Atlantis was said to be busy all day and all night. And I would compare that to any modern city today, which you could argue would be a population within the millions. So if it was as small as Plato described, it wouldn't be feasible to suggest that millions of people would have lived there. And I'll make one other little point, which is that, because many people posit that it could be in the Atlantic Ocean, like at the Azores, and I think that's a phenomenal argument for that. But if I was to defend the wrist shot, or I would say that if this was a place that was spoken from languages of all over and was said to be a trading hub, I don't think that it would be as feasible to suggest that Atlantis would be in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean as opposed to West Africa, which was green at the time. This whole area was connected by a network of rivers, which I should have some slides in there.
Close to the coast. You could get boats in it. You wouldn't have to venture out in the middle of the ocean unless you described in your video. Rivers. You make a very, very compelling argument. Yeah. My question, though, how tall those circles? Like, how high do those things go?
I want to say 60 feet from... Or 60, actually, no, excuse me. I want to say 100 feet at some of the highest points down to the salt. I'd have to remeasure, but if Jamie, if you go over...
Did you go there personally?
No. So I have... In fact, let me give them a shout out. Josh Sigurdsson and David Stig Hansen went there individually. These are some intrepid fellows. It is a gutsy trip. Josh almost died because you have to drive through a minefield to go there. He saw actual skeletons.
He had like an AK pointed at his head.
Yeah.
It's really? A wild ass place. Yeah.
You have to drive through a fucking minefield to get there?
He has balls of steel.
He's an intrepid fellow. Same with David. And to be honest, like, I'd rather fly over it. If someone wants to fly me over it, I'd love to get some great pictures.
What if they shoot at the helicopter?
And that's another thing. I don't want to trash Mauritania because I've heard from people who have gone there, they met the nicest people they've ever met in their lives.
As long as they're not shooting you, they're nice.
But it's worth mentioning that I know.
Well, there's all the gold there, too. I would imagine they would want to protect that gold.
Which is why they won't let you do ground radar here. So Josh brought out ground radar equipment, and they threaten imprisonment. And apparently this is one of those countries where they will cut off your fingers if you get caught stealing, potentially. And this is a country that it wasn't until the 80s as well as additional legislation in like 2007 to abolish slavery, but apparently it's not being enforced. So there are still slaves in Mauritania. So I'm like, when I hear details like this, it makes me just not feel like driving out there.
Do they know that people think that's Atlantis? Are they aware of this?
It's growing. People are now talking about it. People are venturing out there. They have this on their currency, the picture of the wrist shot.
It's the most famous thing. Yeah, well, just the whole term of Atlantis too. We do tend to focus on it being like a single city, a single thing. It was, and I was chatting with Randall about this just last night, and he was saying, there were colonies, there were outposts. They would have had a global kind of outpost all around the world. So it's possible, even likely, that Atlantis existed in various different places, and it's almost a term now that you say Atlantis, it gets this connotation to it. It's almost a pseudo-archaeological term.
Yeah. But we thought that about Troy as well.
We did. Troy's another one. But
Troy's one until what year was Troy actually physically discovered?
1890, something like that. Yeah. Late 1800s, I want to say.
So up until that moment, they thought that Troy was just a myth,
fantasy.
It was just fantasy.
Yeah. Well, but people used to take Atlantis a lot more seriously. It was something happened. Like in the 1960s, there was a lot of legitimate scientific work being done on, in the Azores region, looking at the possibility of subversion and can there be large parts of land that sink. And then something happened where it's like the establishment just turned on it and it became this pseudo term, and anyone who mentioned it was kind of dismissed and shaken off in the same way that, you know, they're treating guys like Hancock and with his ancient Apocalypse series are now. But I don't know specifically what happened, but it used to be taken a lot more seriously, and there's certainly a lot of evidence coming from prior cultures that something did exist. And I think now we've got a massive body of evidence that suggests our history as a species and as a civilization goes way back, much further than what we've thought about as being our own history since, you know, right up until 2006, we pretty much thought, nope, the last 6,000 years, that's when we stopped being cavemen and became, you know, started building cities and organized societies and things like that. And that's whole game
the gatekeepers of academia, you know, just the stuff that you two gentlemen put on your YouTube pages should open up fields of inquiry. People should be reaching out to you. They should be having you speak at universities. They should be watching your videos. They should be like, oh my God, like, look at all this actual evidence, not speculation, not like, look, you're looking at physical, geological evidence, physical erosion evidence, and then all the stuff with the structure that lines up exactly with the stories of Atlantis. It's fucking wild.
It's one of these things, like, I'm a very open-minded person. I can't say, like, with 100% certainty. I mean, anything's possible.
Of course.
But I'm like, there's so many similarities that if nothing else, it shouldn't be ignored. The off the West Coast should be drilled and run with some LiDAR to see what's going on underneath that sediment. And not only that, like, let's just pretend, okay, Atlantis never existed. The wrist shot's not it. Well, then let's, like, focus in then on why is this catastrophic water erosion going through the Sahara 60 million years more recently than it was supposed to. There's another image in there, Jamie, that shows where the Trans-Saharan Seaway went, and it does not reflect it going west over the Western Sahara. So I'm like, in the context of climate science, I'm like, this should be discussed. Why is nobody talking about the Sahara was green potentially 4,500 years ago, which is, by the way, the same alleged date as the Great Pyramid's construction in Giza.